Okay, so I'm just going to sort of go over my curves for the most part, and we're actually going to spend a little tiny bit more time adjusting some things with the feet, just to get a little bit extra out of this animation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my curve editor, and we're kind of just going to go through our curves just one by one. It's a little bit tedious, but it sort of ensures that we have the cleanest possible animation. So I'm looking at this one, and this one's pretty good, and I'm just going to sort of go through and make sure that there's no sort of extra keyframes being added anywhere that are not needed. Select these and check these. That'll do fine. And check this one's good. And rotate Z's good. It's sort of just a matter of going through and making sure we don't have any bogus keyframes sort of adjusted. Just going to sort of go through these and have a look. These are all looking pretty good so far. A little bit tedious, but it definitely ensures that we have the best possible result. So I'm going to grab all these because this is not supposed to be moving at all. There we go. And look at all these. All these have nothing. That looks good. That looks good. That looks good. Go back to our head controller. These will just have rotates on them. Hopefully just the one, because it's a very specific controller. We can sort of look at our feet, and I'm pretty happy with our feet. I kind of checked this as we went, and I can sort of see we've only really got the 3 curves of information going into these, so I can see that they all look pretty good. I'll just do the same for my arms, and I'm just going to sort of focus on this X, because all of these controllers have only got X keyframes, which is really handy. Makes it really nice and easy to see exactly what's going on. And we can see they're all looking pretty good. I can't see any extra keyframes. These ones haven't been animated yet, but these ones have. This one's looking pretty good. Just make sure this one's looking similar. Yeah, lower on this side. And as we can see so far, all of these have been weighted, and because we've used this sort of process where we've worked our way up, adjusting our curves as we go, it was really just a nice quick. The backswing happens down here, so whereas on this arm, the control was sort of opposite. So these 2 outside keyframes represented the point where the arm was at its backmost point, whereas on this controller, and this should be the same, this should hold true for FK controllers on arms as well. It should hold true that these will be opposite. So in this particular case, these first and last keyframes on this arm actually represent the point where the arm's at its frontmost position. So in order to add that sort of stall that I'm going for on the backswing, I'm actually going to drag the tangent weight handles out on the bottom a little first, and then I'll go ahead and grab my extra tangent handles, and I'll grab both of those controllers and drag them all out a bit as well. Maybe a little more. And we'll see sort of how that's starting to look. A little bit of a stall because we're running 32 frames, but that's just what I want. And then it's just a matter of doing the same on the lower arm controller. So if I look at frame 16, I can see that my forearm is facing pretty much horizontal. So from frame 1, I want my arm to be pretty much horizontal, in which case pretty much is. So I'm going to set that keyframe. I'll just leave that as is. I'm happy with that. Set a keyframe there. And then at this position, the arm is at full stretch on the back pose. Almost full stretch anyway. And again, it's just a matter of coming in and doing the same modifications to this curve. Okay, so now we've got a decent section going with the arms. The arms don't appear to be clipping geometry. Now, as the arms swing forward, they're going to swing out. If you've ever had one of those spin top toys where it's just a piece of wood and two strings attached with little balls on them, and you twizzle the stick in your hand, you'll notice that the balls start to fly out, and that's because of centrifugal force. Now the same sort of thing will happen with the arms. As the arms swing forward, they should swing out and up, so to speak. So I'm going to go ahead and try and add that information in now, and that will be done with my arm lift controller. I've got an arm lift controller here for each of these arms, so I'm going to go ahead and try and animate that effect in. So at the moment the arm is sort of swung back. I'm happy with the arm in that position, and I'm happy with it in its middle position as well. So the swinging is going to happen on our major in-between frames, which are 8 and 24. So my arm's going to swing out and then come in, and it's going to do the same on the back travel. That's going to swing out and then come back in. Awesome. Okay, so now it's just a matter of going back in, and just the same way we did before, I'm going to adjust the weights on this so that it's more in kin with the action that my arm's doing. So on that back position, I want it to hold, just the same way as I made the arm hold on the back position with its forward and back traveling. For the swinging travel, I want that outswing to match the forward and back rotations. So if the outswing's stalling at the back, then I want the outswing to stall in the same way. So what I'm going to do is, from my first frame, that's one point where the arm is sort of stalled, and the next there'll be one in the middle as well. But I'm going to grab these, because if we remember from before, I made the arm stall at the back a little more than it stalls at the front. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab these keyframes and these tangent weights that correlate with that section, and I'm going to weight them out a little bit. And then I'm also going to grab that middle one and do the same thing again. So I'm going to free that tangent weight and then grab them, ball out, and just stall them out a little further. So now we should see my swing should have that little bit of choppiness to it. It should sort of work with the rotation that's on my arm. Now, there's other stuff that we can probably add to this, but for the time being that should do just fine. I might just dial this back a little bit, because it's a little bit too much, I think. I might adjust how much swing's happening, so it's coming out and then coming in. Actually, no, I'll get that bit with rotation. Yeah, that'll look much better with rotation. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing on the other arm. So I'm going to grab the other arm lift controller, and again, it's going to be much the same. So at the center position, or our main keyframes, it's going to be pretty much no arm swing. So no arm swing there, no arm swing there, and then no arm swing there, and then frames 8 and 24 are where our swing's going to happen. So I'm going to tweak this one out a little bit. And then same here, this is going to swing out. It could be too much, but we'll see as we go. Okay, and again, I'm going to go into my translate X curves, and in this particular example, I want it to stall a little bit more in the back position, and that's in the middle on this particular controller, just like we sort of discussed before. So I'm going to stretch this one out a little bit first, and then I'll grab my two end ones and grab those as well and stretch them out just a touch. Now our arm's kind of stalling a little bit too much there because of our keyframe, so if I drop that keyframe and see what it's starting to look like. Still not stalling for quite long enough in that front position, so I might be able to adjust that in a little bit, but we'll just go with this for now. Okay, so I'm going to grab my wrist controller, and from frame 0 I want the wrist to be rotated up, so I'm going to rotate my wrist up like so, and then set the same thing on frame 32. Frame 16 is just going to be the opposite of that. So I'm just going to rotate my wrist back. More or less rotate it around a little bit. There we go, and again, just like we've done before with our arm, I want the rotations to kind of match. So what I'm going to do for this one is, seeing as it's all just rotational information, I'm going to find out that, okay, my middle point is my delay point. Delay point because the rest of the arm is delayed a little bit more at the back than the front, so I want to translate that information onto my wrist controller so that the wrist isn't sort of moving of its own accord. I want the wrist to be sort of following with the rest of it. So I've just grabbed that one and moved a little, and then I'll grab all of them and tweak them all out a bit and then sort of see what that gives us. Now we've got our wrist doing what we want. Now naturally there's no offset on there yet, but we'll deal with that in just a little while. So for this section the hand is at its backmost point, but I'm going to start the keyframing from the first point because I know that I've zeroed this out, or relatively zeroed it out. So on that one the wrist is kind of up and relatively straightish, so I'm going to try and achieve the same effect here. I'm not going to be too fastidious about it. I just want to make sure the wrist is in an up position. Sort of rotate it up and set that keyframe. I'm going to come back to frame 0, and it's going to be kind of the opposite. The hand's kind of back and tilted back and so on and so forth. So I'm going to try and get that position in, and I'll copy that position over to 32 as well. And now for this one it's going to be the opposite because it's on the opposite arm, and our back position is our start and end frame as opposed to our middle frame. I'm going to grab all these controllers and I'm just going to tweak them out a little bit, and then I'm going to grab my middle ones as well and do the same thing with all of them. What I'm actually going to do now is I'm going to save my scene. Okay, and I've done those, so what I might do now is I might focus on the head, and we'll come back to the rest of this in a sec. So I'm going to go to my front camera view for the head and just focus on this. So I want it to be looking straight ahead for the most part, so I'm going to make sure I have the rotation of his head set so he's sort of staring the camera down. So I'm going to cancel that because that head's not supposed to rotate like that. I'll do it from the one down, sorry. So I'll grab this one, rotate it so his head's looking forward. And 16, do the opposite, so his head's coming forward like so. I'm also going to try and straighten his head up a little bit so that he's maintaining a relatively even eye level. I'm not going to be too pedantic about getting these identical. And I want this position to be the up position. If we remember before when we were working on the waist, and the down position where the waist goes down was on our in-between frames, which were 8 and 24. So I'm going to do the same thing with the head rotation. That way it'll be nice and simple when I go to offset this to add that sort of secondary bounce to the head. So my 0 position is going to be where his head's sort of rotated up. And I'm going to copy that rotation value, which in this case is the X rotations. I'm going to copy that. Go back to my channel editor. It's a little bit easy to work with the channel editor. And I'm going to pump that into my X rotation. And now middle mouse drag from my 0. Set a keyframe because I know they're both the same. And frame 8 is going to be his head in the lower position. And again, I'm going to copy that value, go over to here, paste that value, set the keyframe, and I'm going to also add a little bit more bounce to this head. So I'm going to set my keyframes just as stationary on the top part of the head. Now this controller is designed to rotate just in the in the x-axis. I'm also going to add a little more bounce to the head, and this will really sort of give me some nice fluid motion when I go to offset these. It'll probably look a little bit too exacerbated now, but once we offset these, it should look really nice. Should being the operative word. So that should look really good once we go to offset those. Now I might grab his chest controller. I might just give him a little bit more down action so that it's just conveying a little tiny bit more weight. And that's just on the Y, so I'm going to set that keyframe and I'm going to grab my Y information, come to frame 24 and plug that back in, and then set a key. Now we've really got a nice amount of thump happening. Now what also is going to happen on this section here is the thump's also going to make him rotate down, so I'm going to come back in and do my rotations down now. And that rotation again is happening on the X, so I'll copy that X value, come to frame 24 and paste that X value. Now this is probably going to need a bit of tweaking, but we're getting a nice little crunch there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come back into my curves. I'm going to sort of clean up any damage that I may have done. So I haven't damaged that. This one's okay. This one's got nothing. This one needs work. This one needs work too. We need to get rid of these 2 extra keyframes that we've placed, because I don't want those on that particular axis. So I'm going to come back to my rotate X. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give these curves more gravity from the base. So by doing that, it's going to make it stall in this position much longer, and it will hurry into this keyframe. So I'm going to grab all these bottom keyframes, I'm going to free their tangent weights, and I'm going to grab those and stretch them out a relatively large amount. And that way it'll add that sense of gravity and that pop back up as he really puts his effort into lifting that upper torso section of his body. I'm just going to go and check the rest of my curves are okay. In this case they're all looking pretty good. This one's good. This one's good. Excellent. Now we can do the same for these. I'm not going to focus incredibly on these, but I'm going to sort of go through these and make sure I haven't damaged any of these by accident. Just going to delete these because I don't actually want any translate Z information on this particular controller. It's not actually intended to move forward and back at all. It's just a rotation controller, so it's always good to double check to make sure that that sort of stuff's not actually on there. So this one's rotating in a few directions. It's rotating in Y, X and Z, and I'm going to focus on cleaning these up. So just with this one, I mean, we're familiar with this one and what we need to do to it, so I'm going to come in and grab these tangent handles, and just the same as we did before, I'm going to come in and weight these, primarily because we've done this same weighting to other curves that are controlling this curve, and by by having a little bit of weight on these curves, it will make these curves work together more smoothly. So there'll be less kind of solo action happening on each of these curves, and everything will be much more unified. Coming to this one, again, we don't need these keyframes because they're just kind of flattening out, giving us a really linear effect. It's basically just adding more information that we don't really need. And again, I'll weight all of these just a little. I'm going to have to come through and do the rest on top of this. And for this one here, so this is my rotate 8, this is the X as it comes down. So again, I want to stall that. I really want it to look like it's got a sense of weight, and things that are really heavy appear to fall really slowly. A good example of that could be watching a tree fall down. If you look at the topmost point of the tree, it appears that it's falling really, really slowly. Or it's not, it's falling at the same speed, but because the object's so big, it appears that it's falling really slowly, and that's sort of based on a gravity curve. Well, actually exactly based on a gravity curve anyway. So I'm going to free these bottom tangents because this is where the head is at its utmost point, and I want that slow down to happen and then sort of speed into the fall, a little bit of acceleration into the descent. So I'm going to grab these bottom tangents and just stretch them, and this will give me some gravity-ish gravity curves. And I'm going to come up and do the same for this one just here. So this one again, this one's only got rotation X, so that's the only value I need to worry about. And I'm going to just flatten these out so that they're uniform. And again, same thing, grab the bottom of these tangent handles, free them, stretch them out. Now, the action looks really, really heavy at the moment with his down action, but that should hopefully ease off once we start doing our offsets. And I might actually even go back in and reduce some of this rotation in areas. So, yeah, we'll go in and do that. It's a little bit too much poppiness on the head there, so I'm going to come into my rotate X. And in this case, it's on the down action, so I'm going to grab that down and just pull it up a little bit so the head's not rotating quite so far down. And I'll do that on the top one as well. So there we go, much nicer. Still falling a lot, but once, like I said, once we start adding our offsets, this should really start looking a bit more snappy. Okay, so now I've done that. I'm going to add a little bit of sort of weight to this character's arms with his shoulder drop. Yeah, not all characters will have this functionality, but it's just a nice, easy way of adding a little bounce to the character's arms. So this will be his up position. If we're going to base our keyframes for the shoulders going up and down based off the hips. So when the hips go up and down, we want the shoulders to go up and down as well, and then we'll offset those once we get to our cycling stage. So for these are going to go up, all the way up pretty much. They're going to be up there, and then on frames 8, our arms are going to be all the way down. Now we can see his arms really sort of fall, and as he comes back up on the up step, his arms sort of pick back up. But I might even actually overextend these to their maximum, and then just set the keyframes on these. His arms are sort of falling. Okay, and I'm also going to do some shoulder extensions, so when his arms are sort of spinning out from the centrifugal force, I want his arms to sort of pull out a little bit, I guess you would say. Sort of almost detach from their sockets a little bit, but just due to the weight of this character's arms. So again, it's going to be based off the hip controller, so when the arms are at maximum swing, that's when I want his arms to be sort of travelling out as much as they're going to. So from frames 0 I'm going to actually just squeeze his arms in a little tiny bit just to sort of overextend this, to exaggerate this action. I'm going to keyframe it all the way across from 0, 16 and 32. And then on frame 8, it's going to be the opposite. I'm going to sort of pop his arms out a little bit, just enough so that I don't see the piston holes. Like if you can see, if I pull them out too far, the pistons sort of break from their holders, and I don't want them to do that too much. I'm going to take it as far as I can, which is about there. Middle mouse click to frame 24, and now we should see that as his arms come down, they sort of pop out, kind of as we'd expect them to for such a heavy guy. Now again, we're going to need to go in and adjust these curves. I'm going to focus on these. So in this case, it's the translate X on both of these features, and they're just sort of both coming in and out. Keeping in mind that they're 4 different parts, but it's a unified action. So the arms are both falling based on the hips. So this is more a whole body action as opposed to a symmetrical action that's offsetted. So we're like one arm swinging backwards and one arm swinging forwards. This is something that's happening to the whole character as opposed to just one side. So what I'm going to do is add some gravity to the fall. So for the shoulder drop, actually, we'll grab the shoulder drop ones first and get that gravity happening on our translate X curves. So I'm just going to focus on these. Now, again, the drop is happening from the high point from 0 going to the low point at frame 8. So I want to grab my high points and I want to stretch those out, and that will make them stay higher for longer and then hurry into the low points. So I'm going to grab my tangent handles, stretch them out a fair bit, and then this should add quite an amount of weight to this. Maybe not too far. There we go. And this should really become apparent. Just grab these and pull them down more if I can. Actually, I won't do that because that's stupid. Okay, so I've got that happening. Shoulder extension is going to be the same thing. So it's going to be from the high point to the low point. So it's going to be the same curves that I'm adjusting. I'm just going to grab those tangent handles and I'm just going to drag them out. And the arm lift, we've already done both of the weights on the arm lifts, have we not? No, we have not. Actually, I'll just leave those as is. Oh no, we have. Yeah, we have. Cool. So I'm going to do some rotations on the arm now. So I'm going to do my inner and outer rotations. So the outer rotation sort of happens more from the core of the character, and the inner shoulder rotation sort of happens more in from the chest. So sort of chest almost kind of revolves around a little bit to tilt the arm, and the inner shoulder happens right from the shoulder. It's kind of like the twist on the arm itself. I'm going to grab my outer shoulder rotation and try and work with that. So I'm going to have these character's arms swing sort of right behind his body. And then it's going to swing in as well as his sort of arm swings around. I'm pretty much just going to leave it at that. So I'm trying to going for a nice clean arc here. So what I'm going to do now is just grab my X curve, and again, like I did with the arms previously, this is a per object, or per I don't know how to phrase it. We're working with just a single arm here as opposed to an effect on the whole character like the arm drop we were looking at before. So As my arm stalls at the back for longer, I need to do the same thing with this controller. I need to make sure that this stalls at the back with all the other stalling happens. Otherwise, parts of the arm's controllers will stall at the back, but others won't, and they'll continue going forward. And then when we get that build-up of sort of differing animation, things start to look jumpy, and that's where we start to lose some of the smoothness of our animation. So I'm going to grab these, weight them, tweak them out a little bit. And then I'm going to grab the middle one and then tweak all of them on top of that. Awesome. So I can do the same with the other one. Focus on this curve, and again we're going to do the same thing, only this time the opposite way around, because the arm at the backmost is from frame 16 instead of from frame 1 and 32. Stretch this out a little bit, grab these, do the same thing, grab the handles, and then tweak them out further. And I'm going to save my scene, and we're going to take a quick break, and then once we come back, I'll do the actually I might just leave the inner shoulder rotations. Once we come back, we might spend a little bit of time just doing a little bit more refining before we take it into a cycling stage. Now there's some more things that we could do with the feet and stuff like that, and we'll try and cover that in our sort of refining path of this animation. Alright, so we'll be back soon. Okay, welcome back, guys. Okay, so where are we at? Let's take a play blast of this. I'm going to turn my curves off, and let's just sort of see where we're at the moment with what we've got. I'm just going to go from a side view, zoom in a little bit so we can see what's going on. And I'm just going to do a play blast. And I'm going to set this to loop. And now we're playing an extra frame, which because I didn't take one off for the play blast, but he's actually looking pretty good. He's got a nice amount of weight to him. He's sort of stalling in the back position. I might actually take that frame off and see how that's going with the frame off. So let's go 31. Let's take another play blast of that. Now it's not playing back awesomely, but it's giving us a rough idea of what's going on, and that's looking not too bad. I mean, obviously we haven't done things like our offsets yet. We're going to sort of focus on doing those probably relatively shortly. Basically now I'm just going to go over my curves and make sure there's no sort of damaged curves or anything, so that once we get into the offsetting stage, we sort of know that our curves are going relatively well.